Lions Nation. Right now, all eyes around the Detroit Lions are locked on one thing, and that is how Brad Holmes is going to attack the upcoming draft, because this is where the foundation of this roster continues to be built. If you are a Lions fan, you already understand that the draft is not just another offseason event for this organization. It is the heartbeat of how this team stays competitive, how it stays physical, and how it stays ahead of problems before they fully appear. And when you look at the latest mock draft roundup coming from Legacy Media, one theme keeps showing up over and over again, and that theme is the offensive line. Daniel Jeremiah released his latest mock draft, and with the 17th overall pick, he has the Lions selecting Francis Nga, an offensive tackle out of Miami, and if you really stop and think about this scenario, it immediately grabs your attention. This is not the type of player most people expect to still be on the board at 17. Moga is listed at 6'6", 315 pounds, and everything about his profile screams power, movement, and aggression. He is not a finesse lineman, he is a brawler. He plays with a violent initial punch, consistently shocks defenders at the point of contact, and creates immediate leverage in pass protection. What really stands out is his athletic profile. For a man that size, his quickness, balance, and body control are rare. He moves like someone much lighter while still anchoring with strength that makes it extremely difficult to collapse the pocket. From a Lions perspective, this is the type of offensive lineman that fits exactly what this team wants to be: controlled aggression, physical dominance, and a mindset that wears defenders down over 4 quarters. He shows natural ability in pass protection, strong anchoring against power rushers, and the willingness to finish plays. Yes, there are areas that still need refinement. His hand placement can be inconsistent at times, and occasionally he relies too much on pure strength instead of clean technique. But at this level, those are details you work on, not red flags. If Francis Moga somehow falls to pick 17, this would be the kind of selection where you sprint to the podium without hesitation. That is why this projection is being viewed as an A+ type of pick. Not because the Lions desperately need a tackle tomorrow, but because this is a premium talent that rarely makes it that far. What makes this even more interesting is that Moga is not the only offensive lineman being connected to Detroit. ESPN's Jordan Reed and Pro Football Network's Jacob Infante both have the Lions selecting Caleb Lemieux. This is a name Lions fans should already be familiar with. Lemieux is widely viewed as a realistic option at 17, and in many ways, he feels like the cleanest projection based on how the board is expected to fall. He fits right into that range, and there is a strong belief that he will still be available when Detroit is on the clock. From a value standpoint, this is where things start to line up almost too perfectly. There is also Spencer Fano, who has been mocked to the Lions by Daniel Flick from Sports Illustrated. In terms of ranking, Fano is viewed as slightly behind some of the top names, but still very much in the conversation. He would need to add some size, but the talent is there. Then there is Vega Lowen out of Penn State, projected by Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports. This is where opinions start to shift. While Lowen has good size and shows promise in pass protection, there are questions about his readiness, especially in the run game. This feels more like a trade-down scenario rather than a straight pick at 17. He is not viewed as a day-one plug-and-play option at that spot, and the Lions have historically been disciplined about value. Another consistent name popping up is Caden Proctor out of Alabama, projected by USA Today and The Athletic. Proctor makes a lot of sense when you think about Detroit's drafting tendencies. Alabama prospects have a track record of fitting what the Lions want physically and mentally. Proctor is extremely athletic, capable of playing multiple positions along the line, and already shows strong pass protection skills. He does need to add weight, likely around 15 pounds, but there is confidence that this can be done without sacrificing athleticism. His movement in the run game, his ability to climb to the second level, and his versatility all make him a very attractive option. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, the message from these mock drafts is loud and clear. There is a strong belief that the Lions will go offensive line with their first pick. The odds lean heavily in that direction, with a much smaller chance of an edge rusher and almost no expectation of something completely outside those positions. This aligns with how Brad Holmes operates. The Lions consistently prepare a year ahead. They draft for future needs, not just immediate holes. Even if Taylor Decker does not retire, the philosophy remains the same. You build the line before it becomes a problem. You You develop players before you are forced to scramble. This is why the conversation around pick 17 is so fascinating. It is not just about who the Lions need today, but about who keeps this team strong for the next several seasons. Every name being mentioned brings a different flavor, a different level of readiness, and a different ceiling. And that leads to the real discussion Lions fans should be having right now. Based on everything being projected and the way this board is shaping up, which offensive lineman would you want the Lions to take at 17, and why? When you continue breaking this down, the most important thing to understand is that this is not about chasing headlines or making a flashy pick that wins social media for a day. This is about sustaining what the Detroit Lions have become. This team is built from the inside out, and the offensive line is the engine that makes everything else work. That is why seeing so many respected outlets repeatedly mocking offensive linemen to Detroit is not a coincidence. It is a reflection of how the league views Brad Holmes and this roster. The Lions are sitting at a point in the draft where value and need intersect almost perfectly. Pick 17 is not a reach zone if the board falls the right way, but it is also not a luxury zone. You need to walk away with someone who can either contribute immediately or be ready to step in without a drop-off when the time comes. That is why names like Francis Moga create so much excitement. If a player of that caliber slides, you are not just filling depth, you are potentially adding a cornerstone. You are talking about someone who can physically change matchups, someone who defenders have to account for snap after snap. Players with that combination of size, athleticism, and aggression do not last long in the draft. At the same time, realism matters. The expectation around the league is that Moga may not even be available when Detroit picks. That shifts the focus back to players like Caleb Lemieux, who many believe is the most realistic and logical option at 17. He fits the range, he fits the need, and he fits the developmental timeline of this roster. This is the type of pick that does not generate chaos or debate inside the building. It is steady, calculated, and aligned with how the Lions have approached roster construction since Holmes arrived.
Then you have Caden Proctor, who in many ways feels like a very Lions selection. Athletic, versatile, battle-tested at a top program, and still with room to grow physically. The idea of adding weight and refining technique under this coaching staff is not viewed as a concern. It is viewed as an opportunity. The Lions believe in development. They believe in getting players into their system and maximizing what they do best. Proctor checks many of those boxes, especially when you consider his ability to play multiple spots along the line. The discussion around Spencer Fano and Vega Lone adds another layer to this conversation. Fano represents a solid option who may not be the top name on the board but still brings value and upside. Lone, on the other hand, highlights the importance of discipline. He may have the tools, but readiness matters, especially at a pick like 17. This is where trade-down conversations come into play. The Lions have shown they are not afraid to move if the value is not right. They will not force a pick just to say they filled a position. What all of this points to is a front office that is thinking long-term. Even if certain veterans remain on the roster, the Lions are planning ahead. They do not wait until the decline happens. They act before it does. That is how you avoid panic seasons and emergency signings. That is how you stay competitive year after year. Drafting an offensive lineman early, even when the unit looks strong on paper, is a statement that this team refuses to get soft in the trenches. And that is why this draft feels so important. Not because it fixes one glaring hole, but because it reinforces the identity of this team. Physical, prepared, and built to last. Whether it is Moaga, Lamu, Proctor, or another lineman who fits the profile, the message remains the same. The Detroit Lions want to dominate up front, and they are willing to invest premium capital to make sure that never changes. Now it comes back to you as a Lions fan watching this unfold. Looking at these projections, the philosophy of the front office, and the reality of the draft board, which direction would you commit to if you were on the clock at 17? If we keep pulling this thread a little further, there's another layer that Lions fans cannot ignore, and that is how this pick reflects trust in the process that has been built over the last few years. The Lions are no longer drafting out of desperation. They are drafting out of position strength. That changes everything. When a team drafts from desperation, mistakes happen. Reaches happen. When a team drafts from strength, patience, and discipline take over, and that is exactly where Detroit is right now. Think about how different this conversation feels compared to past off seasons. The Lions are not searching for a savior. They are not hoping a rookie fixes everything overnight. Instead, they are looking for the next piece that keeps the machine running. That is why offensive line makes so much sense. This front office has consistently shown that it values continuity, depth, and succession planning in the trenches. They do not want to be caught off guard by age, injury, or decline. They want the next man ready before he is needed. That is also why the percentages matter. The strong belief that the Lions go offensive line with this pick is not just speculation. It is rooted in patterns. Brad Holmes drafts a year early. He extends players early. He replaces players before there is a problem. Even if Taylor Decker remains on the roster, that does not change the math. It actually strengthens the argument. Having a young tackle develop behind a veteran is a luxury most teams do not have, and the Lions are in a position to take advantage of it. Edge rusher is still a conversation, and it deserves to be mentioned, but the reality of the board matters. Earlier projections had edge rushers tied to Detroit, but as the draft order settled and the Lions landed at 17, the value shifted. The offensive line group aligns better with where Detroit is picking and what is likely to be available. This is not about ignoring defense. It is about taking what the board gives you and maximizing it. What makes this draft particularly fascinating is that there may not be one universally right answer. There are multiple paths that all make sense depending on how the board falls. If a premium talent like Francis Moaga somehow slips, that is a no-brainer. If not, Caleb Lambeau feels like the clean, logical fit. Caden Proctor brings versatility and upside. Each option supports the same philosophy, just in slightly different ways. And that is where Lions fans should really focus their energy, not on arguing names in isolation, but on understanding the direction. The Lions want to stay physical. They want to stay dominant up front. They want to protect their quarterback and control games in December and January. Every mock draft pointing to offensive line is reinforcing that identity. This is not accidental. This is intentional. As we get closer to draft night, the noise will only get louder. More mocks, more opinions, more debate. But at the core of it all, the Lions' plan is clear. Build through the trenches. Stay ahead of the curve. Do not wait for problems to show up before addressing them. That mindset is why this team is where it is today. So as this conversation continues to evolve and new projections come out, the question becomes even more important. When you think about value, readiness, long-term impact, and the identity of this team, which offensive lineman would you personally trust to be the next building block for the Detroit Lions? As this conversation stretches deeper, it becomes clear that this draft is not just another checkpoint for the Lions. It is a reflection of how far this organization has come mentally. The front office is operating with clarity. There is no panic, no overreaction, and no chasing trends. Everything being discussed around pick 17 points back to one core belief. Control the line of scrimmage, and you control your future. When you listen closely to how these prospects are being discussed, it is not just about measurements or college tape. It is about temperament. It is about whether a player fits the identity Detroit has worked so hard to establish. Physical toughness, consistency, willingness to do the dirty work snap after snap without needing praise. Offensive linemen like the ones being mocked to the Lions embody that mentality. They are not glamour picks, but they are the reason everything else functions. This is also where trust in development becomes crucial. The Lions coaching staff has earned the benefit of the doubt. They have taken players with strong traits and turned them into reliable contributors. That is why adding someone who might need refinement, whether it is hand placement, added weight, or technical polish, is not viewed as a risk. It is viewed as a calculated investment. Detroit is confident in its ability to mold talent, especially in the trenches. Another important aspect that often gets overlooked is flexibility. Drafting an offensive lineman at 17 does not lock the Lions into one path. It actually creates options. It gives them insurance. It allows them to manage contracts, injuries, and transitions without scrambling. That kind of flexibility is what separates stable franchises from teams that constantly feel like they are one injury away from collapse. And this is why the mock draft consensus matters. When multiple respected analysts from different outlets all land on the same position group, it usually tells you something real. It tells you how the league views Detroit's roster, their tendencies, and their needs. This is not groupthink. This is pattern recognition. Offensive line is where the Lions can make a smart pick that pays dividends for years, even if the immediate impact is not obvious on day one. As draft night approaches, emotions will run high. Fans will fall in love with certain names. Others will be disappointed if their favorite player is gone. That is part of the experience. But the bigger picture should not be lost. This team is drafting from a place of strength, guided by a clear plan, and supported by a coaching staff that knows exactly what it wants. No matter which offensive lineman ends up wearing Honolulu blue, the message will be the same. The Lions are not taking shortcuts. They are reinforcing the foundation. They are preparing not just for this season, but for the seasons that follow. That is how contenders stay contenders. When you stay on this topic a little longer, it really drives home how intentional this entire approach has been from Detroit. This is not a team reacting to outside pressure or trying to satisfy mock drafts. The mock drafts are reacting to the Lions. Analysts are connecting the dots because the blueprint has been consistent for years now.